What's up, guys? So today I want to talk about something that I personally have not had a problem with in Warframe for a very long time because I've quote-unquote completed the game for a few years straight now. But it's something that as a early to mid-game, even going into late-game player, I really struggled with this, and it was kind of a giant thorn in my side. It was a really big pain in the ass for basically the entire duration of the game, especially once you get into the later parts of the game. And that is the kind of ridiculous amount of investment you need to get quote unquote max builds. Obviously, most builds that you see from YouTubers will have, there'll be continuity instead of prime continuity, there'll be Hell's Chamber instead of Galvanized Hell. All these, seemingly small few mods that prop up, but over the course of an entire account and someone's time playing Warframe and trying to max their equipment, it really adds up. Now, I haven't done the math on quite everything, but this is my collection of Prime mods. Now, to be fair, a lot of these I would say are not necessary, right? All of the Arcwing and Arc Gun stuff, you just kind of don't need these. Arc Gun is really irrelevant. It's a feature for sure, and sometimes you need to use it, but you don't need the Prime mods for it, especially Arc Wing. You really don't. Stuff like the reload speed Prime mods, the magazine sized Prime mods are pretty whatever. But still, even with all that, a lot of these are, I would say, necessary mods you need going into and preparing to do end game stuff. And because one prime mod to max it out is, we're gonna round up and say 41,000 endo and 2 million credits. If we assume that there are at least 25 primed mods that are quote unquote necessary, obviously there's no such thing as necessary prime mods. You can beat the whole game and do EDA, ETA with all normal mods. You don't need primed all. But if there are at least 25 necessary prime mods, then it takes over 1 million endo to max all those out, and over 50 million credits. Which, if you look at how many credits and endo I have right now, as somebody who has not really dumped credits or endo into the game in the last 2-3 years, the only time that I spend credits is for Arcane Dissolution occasionally. That's insane. And it gets more insane the more the game goes on. Because, to my knowledge, they've never really lowered this fusing cost. They have made legendary cores slightly more accessible, I would say. But they also haven't really introduced much better ways of grinding endo. As far as I know, it's still that one arena game mode on Sedna, which there's a whole, probably a document about the exact optimal setup you want to grind endo with that. My friend has done it. I've never done it personally. And he reported that it was very good endo gains. However, if it takes a pre-made squad of 4 precise builds and gameplay, that's not super accessible to a new player who probably doesn't have one of those 4 frames that are necessary. And this problem just only gets worse, because as we're seeing now, with the release of, over time, the primed Murmur Bane mods, obviously there are, I believe I've gotten all the ones, so I think we're still missing the shotgun one? No. I think we're still missing the primary one. Maybe. But even just releasing the shotgun, pistol, melee, and rifle primed Bane mods for the Murmur is going to be another 160,000 endo, 8 million credits that you need to spend to max out the Bane mods. Now, I'm going to preface this. I think Bane mods in current Warframe are worthless. I don't think there is a single build that needs them, and the amount of extra damage that they provide is completely unnecessary. But it's still, by the numbers, oftentimes the best damage increase for a lot of builds. So they are not an irrelevant part of the game that should be ignored and never looked at again. And this is just for the Murmur. Obviously, now we have two more new factions. You got the Tekra and you got the Skaldra, who, as far as I know, don't actually... Yeah, they don't even have normal Banes yet, which is really great. But whenever those come out, that's another 8 primed mods that you need to max out. That's 320,000 Endo, and, what, 16 million credits? And every time they keep adding more primed mods, or primed equivalent mods, I mean, it just keeps getting worse. And this is without mentioning the galvanized mods, which I would say these are actually oftentimes more essential than primed mods, especially like your galvanized multi-shot mods. Obviously, the headshot on crit, or the crit chance on headshot, I think these three you could kind of ignore for the most part. But galvanized shot, I got the status damage. Galvanized mods I think are very important. The multi-shot mods I think are like almost like mandatory. And for melee, I think galvanized steel is basically mandatory. Galvanized element is not so much. But these are another... I think these are 30,000 Endo, because these are considered one below. These are rare mods, technically. So this is another 30,000 Endo per mod, so that's another 360,000 you're spending on these. And the reason that I find the system frustrating is that, well, for one, it creates... in my opinion, I think there's a bit of confusion on the new player side of seeing things like Bane of Orokin, but also Cleanse Orokin, and being really confused until they, read the smaller text that says, this is a shotgun mod, this is a rifle mod. But then I also raised the question, why are these separate mods? If these are giving the same value, they're taking up the same capacity, the only difference is the category of weapon they're allowed to be put on. Does this need to take up 2 slots? Like, do these need to be 2 separate mods? And even still, I know that this is the same. It's going to end up being 1.55 and 14 cost. Does the pistol need to be different too? And same with the melee. Do the smite mods, or do the bane mods, need to be separate for each weapon category? And I think, to me, the answer is an easy no. Mainly, just simply because it's the same mod. It's just copy and pasted 4 times over with a different name, and it goes on a different type of weapon. But then we extend this a little bit further. Why did the different weapon categories have different mods to begin with? And I think back in the day, around when I started playing, or probably even before that, because pistols were generally considered to be weaker, and they were supposed to be weaker than primaries, it made sense for a lot of pistol mods to then provide greater increases. So, for instance, Hornet Strike is 220% damage, but Serration is 165. And I think that made sense, because your mods needed to make up for the worse base stats that pistols would often have. And then shotguns, I think, needed to have different numbers because of the innate multi-shot problem. I believe Hell's Chamber is 120. Meanwhile, I can't remember the name of the Split Chamber is 90%. So they needed to be different values because shotguns had innate multi-shot by being a shotgun. And it's the same thing with I believe the Point Blank is... Yeah, Point Blank is 90%. Not really sure why this is... Point Blank regular is 90%. I don't know why it's so much weaker than Serration, but it is. And I believe pressure point is... Yeah, pressure point is 120. Again, not really sure why this value is different. But, you know, point still stands, at least for pistols, that originally, because pistols were weaker than primaries, the mods had to be higher values. Now, I think we can all agree that in 2025, that is not the case anymore, right? You got the Latum, you got the Octi-Core, you got the Dual Toxicist, you got the Lex, you got the Coda Catabolus. I mean, there are Kuva Nuker, there are so many pistols that are dominant, and I would argue are better than most primaries. And it leaves you wondering, why do pistol mods need to be separate from rifle mods at all? Obviously, I think there are some things that can be pistol specific because the feature is only available on those weapons. But actually, I'm not totally sure what those would be. The only ones that I can think of would be things like, for snipers, which is not a separate weapon category, but would be snipers only being able to put on like plus zoom mods. However, I'm pretty sure that's actually not the case right now. There are certain corrupted mods, depleted reload, that are only for sniper. I actually didn't know that charged chamber was also only for sniper, but there you go. Yeah, and things like Harkonar scope. I mean, you know, other weapons don't have combo duration. This makes sense to be sniper only. Target acquired. I mean, this could be... I don't know why this can't go on normal weapons. I guess it would be too strong. I don't really think so, but sure. And then all the different ammo mutations. I have like barely ever used these. Yeah, all four of these provide the same... All four of these provide the same amount of ammo. These all convert ammo pickups into 50% primary. They convert secondary ammo into primary ammo. So I guess the pistol does need to be separate because it's converting primary into secondary. But these three do not need to... Like, these two don't need to exist. Just rename this to primary ammo mutation and rename this to secondary ammo mutation. And now you have one less mod, or two less mods that you need to exist. And I know a lot of people are very much against the idea of deleting things because it's kind of bad practice, and I can understand that. But in this instance, I think that with the amount of mods that Warframe has, just raw number of mods, clearing some of those out might not be a bad idea. Especially when it's in the light of simplifying the system and making it easier to get into. Obviously, I am talking about all of this with the knowledge that they are going to add the teacher quest coming up in a few months. And I really doubt that they have this planned. And after the teacher quest is added, I think this is exponentially less likely to happen. Which is kind of a shame, because this is something that I truly believe would only benefit the game. And it would also provide no downside, because DE has proved many times that they can run these scripts to refund you of any endo or credit spent on mods if they ever change mods in a major way. They did it with Firestorm and the secondary one, which, by the way, Firestorm and... what the hell is it called? Fulmination. These don't need to be two separate mods. They give the same number. They both give 44% explosion radius. They cost 16. No reason for these to be different. But they refunded you of your endo and your credits. I think just your endo, actually. I don't think they did your credits. When they changed these mods to be 44 instead of 66%. So clearly they could run like some sort of script to detect if you owned a rank 10 version of certain mods, certain prime mods, and refund you based on that. Or probably they could go even more specific and detect if you spent Endo on leveling up, Smite or Bane mods, and then refund you based on that. And then just delete the item from your inventory. And in that case, I don't think anyone loses. Right? We all get, or probably we all get, rank 10 Banes for all weapon categories of all factions that currently exist. So because they've started doing the Murmur, now you'd have rank 10 Banes of Murmur for all your guns, all your weapons, and you don't have to worry about when they're going to release the... Which one do they need? What, Bane? Yeah, Bane of Murmur. And whenever they get around to doing faction mods for Skaldra and Tekrot, they only have to release one for each faction, and then they're done. Now we can take this a step further, and in my opinion, all of the primed elemental mods do not need to be... Well, actually, just flat out, all of the elemental mods do not need to be weapon specific, right? If I search for heat, there is... they're in here. You got Heated Charge, you got Hellfire, Incendiary Coat, Molten Impact. Why do there need to be 4 of these? They all cost 11, they all have a dash polarity, they all give 90% heat to their respective category. These don't need to be weapon specific. Roll all these into one, and just make it the heat mod. Same thing with the 60/60s, right? You got Scorch, Scattering Inferno, not Flame Gland, Thermite Rounds, Volcanic Edge. These all can be one, and that especially increase or assists with the grind on getting the 60/60 elemental mods, because I know that these, I don't remember which one specifically is a pain in the ass, but I know that some of these 60/60 elementals are really, really annoying to get, and that's why people pay like 50 plat for them, I think. But yeah, it would help out with that. And one good example of a stat that I don't think all the mods of a category need to be rolled into one for is fire rate. Gunslinger is 72%, Shotgun Barrage is 90%, Speed Trigger is 60%. I think fire rate, unlike something like damage, is something that is very purposefully set per weapon category to be what it is. So allowing, for instance, rifles to get a free 90% fire rate, you know, there's a reason why the 90% fire rate for rifles includes a damage penalty, could be a little problematic there. If we're being honest, I don't really think it would be, but I could understand the reasoning against it. Yeah, this also removes Creeping Bullseye, Critical Delay, and Critical Deceleration. All 3 of these mods do the same thing. You can loop all these into one. The only difference, I guess you can argue, is that, you know, this one is a V polarity, this is a dash polarity, but just pick one, it doesn't matter. And I'm actually noticing here, Anemic Agility is also 90% fire rate, 50% damage. What is the shotgun version? Interesting. So this is also 90% fire rate, 50% damage, but Shotgun Barrage is just 90% fire rate. Huh. Now that's an interesting one. I've never really noticed that before. Well, you could roll all these mods into one. Even though this mod literally serves no purpose. Not sure what they were cooking with that one. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on this problem, I would say. It just kind of, you reach a point in the middle to late game where you're starting to get all these prime mods from Borrow, because you're able to farm ducats pretty easily by just, occasionally doing some relics, getting a little lucky with rares. But farming Endo is just a whole other demon, right? I mean, at best, if you're, let's say, a pretty casual player, you only play for like an hour and a half a day, maybe you're doing the sortie every day, you can get 4,000 endo from that per day. And even doing that, it would take you 10 days to max out one prime mod. And that, I mean, when you put it like that, and you look at how many prime mods there are that, you know, you really want to max out, it kinda sucks. I will say things like Sacrificial Pressure and Sacrificial Steel these have been completely power crept out of the game. I don't think either of these are relevant anymore. Sacrificial Steel sometimes is, but pretty rarely. People will argue that the Umbral Fiber and Vitality mods are terrible as well. I don't agree because I like to health tank, but if you're a Shield Gate stan, then, you know, these don't have to be upgraded either. But other than that, you want most of these here to be maxed out. Obviously, I don't think you ever need to max out Bane mods, because you're not going to catch me using one on basically any build that I run frequently. But they are an element of the game, and they should be treated as such. And I think a big reason as to why newer or mid to early endgame players don't use them is because they just simply don't want to spend the endo to max them out. And yeah, I don't know how many this is exactly, but I mean, this is a ton of endo to spend. And unlike something like, for instance, another thing you might argue is kind of hard to get into as a mid to late game player is arcane adapters on your weapons, primary and secondary mainly. But I find that to be less of an issue because whenever you complete a planet in the steel path, you get this burst of, I think it's 25 steel essence, and that feels good because that allows you to instantly get almost 2 full adapters. And the odds that you have more than like 5 or 7 weapons at that point in the game where you're clearing off steel path planets, that you need more than that, is pretty low, I would say. But the odds that you need to max out, you need your prime continuity, you need your prime flow, you need your prime redirection, you know, you're on Hildren maybe, you need your Umbral Intensify, like... and this is also, again, I have not even mentioned in terms of how much endo you need to spend to become a quote-unquote true endgame player. Things like Adaptation's a pretty popular mod. Obviously, this one you don't really have to max out, but you still have to level it up at least a little bit, I think. Things like Transient Fortitude is a rank 10 rare mod, that's 30k endo. Blind Rage is 30k endo. Yeah, there's just a ton of these mods. And mods like those, corrupted mods, those are just, they cost 30k because that's how much they cost. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But when you have 4 separate Bane of Oricans, and the only difference is which type of weapon you're allowed to put the mod on, I think that's bad. For early game players, and also just for end game players in general. Because you're just wasting resources that don't really need to be wasted. And yeah, that's gonna about do it. Obviously I kind of just asserted my solution as like the solution, but I don't think it's the only way. I think just adding more ways to get endo in somewhat large quantities would be helpful. But that hasn't really, I don't really think there's been any great ways to increase your endo gain in the last like 5-6 years or so. But if you guys have other ideas, let me know. If you agree that this is a problem, let me know. If you think I'm just blowing this way out of proportion, then also let me know on that. But I do think if you're an endgame player, please respect and listen to the opinion of more early game players more, because they are the ones who are currently in the throes of it right now. So they really know. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you guys later.